The dogs and the cats and the monkeys are a lot like you. The chickens and the cows and the geese, they're a lot like me. We all just want to be, we all just want to be, we all just want to live happy and free. Hi, and welcome back once again to another edition of Animals Have Rights. Just some quick news. I was looking through, discovered some interesting things, but the first one I want to tell you that there's a paper was just published in the American Journal of Primatology in 2009, and they've discovered that stone hammering, well, let me just read you the little thing. It says, stone hammering in natural conditions has been extensively investigated in chimpanzees and bearded capuchins. You might have seen some of that stuff with chimpanzees in National Geographic. In contrast, knowledge of stone tool use in wild Old World monkeys has been limited to anecdotal reports, despite having known for over 120 years that macaques use stone tools to process shelled food from intertidal zones on the islands of the Andaman Sea. So what they discovered was that, in fact, the monkeys use two different types of stone tools. They use specialized stones that they use to crush shellfish to get to their meat, and they use a stone hammer to scrape other sorts of shellfish that are growing on the rocks. Also, in a related study, they found out that the macaques, when they're using these tools, that they do it much slower, much more pronounced when their young macaques are watching them. So not only are they using specialized tools, but they're also apparently teaching their young monkeys how to use those tools. I thought that was pretty interesting. Let me see. Today, I'm going to just tell you what I'm going to be talking about, and then I think we'll jump ahead a little bit. Most of what I'm going to talk to you, this program is being pre-recorded. So by the time it comes out, I hope that you will have had ample opportunity to see, as I talked to you last week, about the article that came out in the Isthmus, Bill Lueders' cover story about a monkey that he adopted. He went in and saw the monkey when it was born, and he basically has been trying to follow the monkey's life story. It's R04040. The R stands for rhesus. And the follow-up of the things that he's learned, he got to visit the lab, and I thought it was pretty interesting because there's a number of quotes in the article from the Primate Center director, Joe Chemnitz, and the Primate Center attending veterinarian, Buddy Capuano. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you mostly about today after we get through with our news segment. I was going to talk to you, that I'm not going to. I was going to talk to you about, I want to say first, thanks for keeping those questions and suggestions coming in. A repeated question is, even though with all of this horrible stuff going on, what can be done about it? What can I do as an individual? What should somebody writing in, what should I do about stopping all this? And just a teaser for, I think, something we'll probably talk about next week is, the answer is I really don't know. The problem is so gigantic. It's so entrenched in society. I think that probably the main answer is that you might consider finding ways to limit the harm that you do. And of course, that primary way would be perhaps to embrace a vegan lifestyle. But more about that next week. And I think we're just going to go directly to our news segment with attorney Leslie Hamilton and Animals in the News Today. I think is Leslie.
Thank you, Rick. And it is Animals and the Law today. I think that some of what I have to say is newsworthy, some of it is historical, but I think all of it is applicable to the relationship that we have with animals, usually our companion animals, every day. Today, or this evening I should say, I'm going to be talking to you about the regulation by usually municipalities of so-called dangerous dogs, or sometimes termed vicious dogs. Essentially, the regulation of dogs categorized as dangerous or vicious takes 6 basic forms. One of the most common, and an illustration of this procedure was seen in the case of Igor, a dog that was deemed dangerous and sentenced to death. last fall, pursuant to an ordinance passed by the city of Middleton or a state statute, which we have in Wisconsin, which also allows a court to order the destruction of a dog if the dog has bitten two people or animals off the dog's property. And that was the case in Igor's situation. The city of Madison also has a dangerous dog ordinance, and many municipalities do. The ordinances generally include a procedure for identifying a dangerous dog. It will define the essentially the crimes that a dog has to commit before it will be considered dangerous, and then the opportunity by the owner of the dog or the guardian of the dog to contest that determination. The possible outcomes include always the destruction of the dog, and that was the sentence in Igor's case until several people in the Madison area were able to gather up enough money to send Igor to a sanctuary. And the news I have from that sanctuary is that Igor is adjusting very well and seems to be a well-balanced and happy dog on that property at least. Another common disposition for dogs determined to be dangerous is that they're required to wear a special collar so that when they're on walks on the streets of the municipality, people can be notified who are walking by that this is an animal they need to be wary of. Or in addition to a collar, a special license that will generally cost as much as 10 times what a license would be for any other dog that had been neutered or spayed. Oftentimes a muzzle will be required and a short leash. Some situations the government agency will order, or a court if there's an appeal, will order that the dog be at all times in a fenced enclosure and never allowed to walk on the public byways. Another remedy or disposition for dangerous dogs has been implemented by several other states, and that is the creation of a dangerous dog registry, which operates much as the sex offender registries do that most, if not all, states now have in the United States. The dangerous dog registry is available usually online in order to be more effective, and it will include the dog's mugshot, the dog's address, and the dog's offense history. Another approach taken by government agencies in various jurisdictions around the United States has been to enhance the civil penalties that may be assessed, fines and forfeitures against the owners of dogs who should be aware that they have a dangerous dog. Usually in those laws, a dog will have bitten or been aggressive toward another person or animal, thereby the owner then knowing that they have a dangerous dog, and if the owner fails to take some of the usual measures, short leash, muzzle, whatever, they can be subject to considerably enhanced fines and forfeitures if the dog were to aggress against another person or animal. Also, criminal penalties for the owners of dangerous dogs have been enhanced. Again, usually when there has been a media report about a particularly egregious occurrence, usually involving a serious injury or even death of a child or an elderly person or another vulnerable adult. In Texas, for example, if an owner has reason to know that his dog is dangerous, again, usually because of some history of aggression, and the dog then does seriously injure an individual after the owner had that knowledge, the owner can be sentenced to up to 10 years in prison. Also, and a law such as this was introduced in Wisconsin last session, has not been reintroduced this session, would prohibit anyone who was convicted of a felony for several listed dangerous or serious offenses from owning a dog that has not been spayed or neutered. And that law essentially acknowledges the fact that most aggressive dogs are dogs that have not been spayed or neutered, in addition to the fact that they're usually poorly bred, not trained, or if they are trained, they're trained to be aggressive, or were poorly socialized when they were puppies. And then finally brings me to breed-specific laws, commonly referred to as BSLs, breed-specific legislation. And like many of these other laws and procedures, usually are developed by the legislature, the municipal city council, county board, because there has been media reports regarding, again, a particularly egregious incident involving the death or maiming of a child or elderly adult. These breed-specific laws generally will target pit bulls. In fact, there is a pit bull ordinance in the city of South Milwaukee. It's about 15 years old, and it was challenged by the Dog Federation of Wisconsin. The Court of Appeals issued a decision in 1993 finding that the breed-specific legislation was constitutional, although the Dog Federation alleged and had expert testimony from dog behavioralists and veterinarians to support their arguments that the pit bull and the ordinance against the pit bull violated the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution because it essentially said that owners of one particular breed of dog had to abide by laws and restrictions that didn't apply to any other owner of any other breed of dog, despite the fact that there was not adequate evidence to show that pit bulls as a breed were inherently dangerous. However, the court determined that there was enough evidence and that as a matter of public health and safety, that the ordinance would be upheld as constitutional. The Dog Federation of Wisconsin also challenged the ordinance on the basis that the ordinance was vague, in that not only would it regulate the pit bull, defined as the American Pit Bull Terrier, Staffordshire Bull Terrier, or American Staffordshire Terrier in the ordinance, but also any dog that was a mixed breed that included any of those breeds. The expert witness for the Dog Federation said that there's no way of knowing when you have a mixed breed dog who may look like the typical pit bull dog, whether or not that is a dog that includes the line of the identified pit bull breed. Apparently no genetic tests were available, at least at that time, to establish a dog breed. However, again, the Wisconsin Court of Appeals dismissed that argument, upholding the ordinance. There have been other states in which the dog-specific or breed-specific laws have been challenged on exactly the same grounds, and those challenges were successful. Last time I looked, there were 12 state statutes. 12 states had passed statewide laws prohibiting local municipalities from passing breed-specific laws for exactly those reasons identified by the Dog Federation. Poor breeding, usually overbreeding, poor socialization, and poor training, that is what creates a dangerous dog. It is not the breed, it is the human, it is the owner. And speaking of poor breeding and irresponsible humans, please call your legislator and ask them what their position is on the Wisconsin puppy mill law, which was introduced last month here in Wisconsin, a law that will do much to address the problem of poor breeding, poor socialization, and the production of dogs that are going to cause more problems for their owners than many of the dogs that you will find in your local shelter. Next time on Animals in the Law Today, I will again talk about dangerous dog ordinances and the right to due process afforded owners who find their dogs labeled dangerous. And that is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth on Animals in the Law Today. Back to you, Rick.
Thank you, Leslie. Let me jump right into this article from Bill Lueders in the Isthmus. He got this daily care log of the monkey that he has more or less adopted, this R04040, and this is the story of this monkey's life. For the past 5 years, this monkey hasn't been used in any research. He's essentially just basically languishing at the Primate Center. I'm just going to briefly run down a couple things here. He was born on April 26th in 2004. April 27th, they tattooed his number on his thigh. And on April 28th, he was first referred for diarrhea. Following several days on December 28th of that year, he had diarrhea for several days, and his rectum prolapsed because of the diarrhea. This is essentially his anus turned inside out. They said in the records that it was probably stress related, and it happened during a cage cleaning. He was certainly so frightened that his anus, his rectum prolapsed. In 2005, the diarrhea continued, and again they noted it was probably stress induced. Between April 4th and the 17th, they started giving him antibiotics, but they couldn't stop the diarrhea. On May 10th, he was vomiting. May 13th, he had another prolapse of his rectum. On June 20th of that year, they had another prolapsed rectum with a great deal of blood. On June 16th, they started calling the diarrhea chronic. It reports mention of dozens of times of diarrhea. Rectal prolapses are recurring. In 2006, he's sedated for extensive testing for viruses, but they can't find anything. All the results are negative, and the diarrhea has now become intermittent, at least. On February 20th, he was reported because his right hand was swollen because he had it stuck in the cage bars. On the 22nd, he was moved to a group housing pen. On October 2nd, he was bruised and had a swollen right eye. Throughout the next couple years, the next year, he saw all sorts of wounds appearing on him. He escaped June 19th, and as they tried to sedate him, he experienced hyperthermia. Let's see, he had more wounds and he had more diarrhea. In 2008, he had a bloody nose, he had a bruise on his cheeks, multiple superficial wounds, large scratches on his abdomen. Throughout the year, multiple wounds, new wounds, his tail is swollen and bleeding. Continuing through the record, continued reports of minor scratches, swelling, and more diarrhea. This year, in January 26 of 2009, they found more bloody stool. It was tied to the history of his diarrhea and rectal prolapses, they thought. As recently as March 9th of this year, he was reported for pacing. This pacing by a monkey in one of these labs is called stereotypic behavior, and it's generally conceded to be a sign of stress-induced mental illness, as well you can imagine. I read through his records and the complete set of his records, and it appeared to me that at one point he was in a group cage, and he was essentially low man on the pecking order, and he was being beaten up repeatedly. So let me go now. Joe Chemnitz and Betty Capuano, who Bill Lueders got to interview, they said that they thought that R04040 had it pretty good. This animal has not had a difficult life, says the veterinarian Capuano. He's healthier and happier than a lot of animals. They say R04040's diarrhea, now less frequent, according to Lueders here, is not necessarily stress-related, even though his lab report speculates that it is. Lueders asks in the article, isn't it sad to see them spending their whole lives in a cage? Chemnitz and Capuano refuse to concede the point. If you watch the animals, they don't look chronically depressed or sad, even though he's pacing back and forth. His anus is prolapsing. They were born here, they're fed and cared for, and the center tries to make their lives as enriched as it can. Then Capuano agrees. I'm a veterinarian, he notes. I took an oath to protect animals. And this brings us to an obviously, and here I quote from a George Bernard Shaw in 1911, this brings us to an obvious but mostly overlooked weakness in the vivisector's position. That is, his inevitable forfeiture of all claim to have his word believed. It's hardly to be expected that a man who does not hesitate to vivisect for the sake of science will hesitate to lie about it afterwards to protect it from what he deems the ignorant sentimentality of the laity, people like me. Ignorant sentimentality. Now, a couple things. They said that the diarrhea isn't stress related, and in fact they just sort of wrote it off as unimportant. But in fact, here's a paper from 2003 that starts out with the line, chronic enterocolitis, this is diarrhea, is the leading cause of morbidity in colonies of captive rhesus macaques. In colonies of non-human primates, recurring diarrhea is the leading cause of animal morbidity leading to veterinary care. In fact, in 2002, the sister facility at Texas, the Southwest Foundation for Biomedical Research, reported that following protracted, intractable diarrhea that could last up to 2 years, it normally occurred in infants, juveniles, and young adult animals, and that a substantial number of animals had died at the Southwest Foundation because of their protracted, intractable diarrhea, just like we see here RO4040's poor case. So that brings us to the question then, if they can't cure diarrhea in monkeys that have this chronically, and it's epidemic throughout the United States, how is it that they're going to cure AIDS? How is it that they're going to cure cancer or any very highly complex disease if they can't cure and don't even know the cause of diarrhea? Now, Buddy Capuano, you'll notice, he said, I'm a veterinarian. I took an oath to protect animals. Buddy Capuano, you're a liar. In 2003, in fact, Buddy Capuano was working at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, where he was before he came to Wisconsin. And in fact, he was infecting monkeys with SIV and various other sorts of things, like, for instance, Pseudomycystis carnii, or carnii. This is a type of an organism that causes pneumonia in animals that are infected with SIV. SIV is the simian immunodeficiency virus that causes a complete collapse of their immune system. They end up lying on their sides in their cages. They become so weakened, they lose weight, they become anorexic, they develop chronic diarrhea, bloody noses, and finally they die if they're not killed first by the veterinarians. So what they were doing is they were taking these monkeys, they were infecting them with SIV, and then in fact they were giving them other diseases on top of that to see how that affected them. Here's a paper from as recently as 2006, and Buddy Capuano, the man who took the oath to protect animals, was an author on this paper. In this paper, they were infecting monkeys intentionally with tuberculosis. And what they found was that, of course, is that monkeys that had the largest doses got the sickest. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim that you're there to protect the animals and yet you're infecting them with diseases that you know are going to kill them, and in fact infecting them and then killing them yourself and examining their bodies. That brings me to another thing. Here we're talking about the problems with the primate center's health. They can't cure the animals of diarrhea. In fact, it turns out that most of the animals at the primate centers around the country are have chronic poor health. We know that they're all suffering from something that's called vitamin A. What's the word? Hypervitaminosis A. In fact, the requirements, the suggested amounts of vitamin A, that they've done studies now, even here at the University of Wisconsin, and what they found out, you may not know this, but vitamin A is toxic. If you take too much of it, you get sick. There's all sorts of symptoms from it. And in the studies that they've done here, they found that the monkeys that are eating the commercial monkey chow have 4 times the amount of vitamin A that they think would be healthy. So now the animals that they're studying, I should remind you of this, that they always say this, that the researchers contend that good animal care and good science are inextricably linked, that you can't do good science unless you're doing it on healthy animals. But in fact, the animals are have this widely epidemic proportion of chronic diarrhea. They're sick of hypervitaminosis A. And in fact, the stress from just simply being in the cages is causing them to pace back and forth endlessly. They're biting themselves, they're chewing themselves, all of that stress causes their immune systems to go haywire. And so these are the animals that they're going to experiment on then to try to claim that they're going to find a cure for very severe diseases in humans, Parkinson's, HIV, and diseases that are so complex and so little understood that these people who can't cure diarrhea in monkeys, given an endless supply of the monkeys, open-ended, they can do anything to them that they want, and they can't cure simple diarrhea. Now we know why the monkeys have diarrhea. They have diarrhea because their diets are inadequate, because they're stressed, because they're being beaten up, because people are coming into the room and hurting them. I would have diarrhea if I was in those situations myself. So Joe Chemnitz, you're a liar. Buddy Capuano, you're a liar. Everybody at the Primate Center is telling people that they're curing diseases. In fact, they're not. They're telling everybody that the animals are well cared for. In fact, they're not. This poor monkey that Bill Lueders is looking at, this 5 years has been sitting in the Primate Center, has never been used in experiments. So for the 5 years that he's been there with his rectum prolapsing, with his diarrhea, with the other monkeys beating him up, just waiting, just having to stand in line until somebody decides that they want to come in, they want to drill holes in his head. Oh, here's one thing. In the article it says that they've discovered that this monkey's immune system is so bad that he has no resistance to infectious diseases. So now they want to enter him into an infectious disease study so that they can now inject him or do something about making him sick so that they can now study that. Well, he's sick enough. Try to cure him. Try to stop hurting him. I could go on forever, but animals have rights. So remember, the dogs and the cats and the monkeys are a lot like you. The chickens and the cows and the geese are a lot like me. We all just want to be, we all just want to live happy and free. So I think that's pretty much going to wrap us up for now. And I'll say goodbye. And I think I might have 1 minute left. I don't know. I mean, somebody's going to signal 1 minute to go. So let me see. Let me read you some quick headlines. I didn't think I'd have time for these, and I'm just going to read us off the air. Here they've made a discovery that, let's see, they found that monkeys that are in self-injurious, this is from 2009, that if you give monkeys Prozac or Wellbutrin, that doesn't seem to make too much difference. They still mutilate themselves in the cages. Here's a study from 2009 that says that if you put a lens over a monkey's eye that makes it, when it's an infant, so that it can't see very well, that it distorts its eye as it's developing. That's a breakthrough, isn't it? Here's another one. They found out that if you keep monkeys, their circadian memory all goofed up, that they're not very good at learning. Old monkeys, if you mess up their day and night schedule, they can't learn very well. Here's another story, that monkeys that are addicted to morphine, that by golly, they have a worse case if they're infected with SIV. Isn't that good to know? Here's another one, a minimally invasive way to fix their head. This is now, they found a new way. The dogs and the cats and the monkeys are a lot like you. The chickens and the cows and the geese, they're a lot like me. We all just want to be. We all just want to be. We all just want to live happy and free.